Jaden's ship shuddered violently as it tore through the upper atmosphere of Lithera, alarms blaring in an incoherent symphony of panic. "Okay," he muttered to himself, gripping the controls as if sheer willpower could undo the fact that he'd ignored 3 red warning lights and a blinking alien inscription that likely said, "Do not crash here, moron." The ship fishtailed like a mechanical eel, and he threw a hand over his face when the console displayed the unhelpful phrase, "Hull integrity, mostly intact." Mostly intact, he decided, was either comforting or terrifying, and in his case, terrifying seemed more appropriate. With a final lurch, the ship hit the ground with a metallic groan that could have been mistaken for the planet itself sighing in disappointment. Jaden emerged from the cockpit, shaken but alive, which, considering his track record, counted as a personal victory. The first thing he noticed were the spires. Lithera's floating crystal spires glimmered against the iridescent sky, pulsing with light like the heartbeat of the planet itself. Every step he took made the ground hum beneath his boots. "Not creepy at all," he muttered, glancing around as a small, floating creature resembling a cross between a jellyfish and a disco ball hovered nearby, blinking curiously at him. He waved. The creature blinked faster, which he took as acknowledgement, though it might have been signaling that he was about to die. He had a habit of assuming the best. Then he saw her. Arya moved through the crystal-lit air with a grace that made even the floating spires seem clumsy in comparison. Her long ears, delicate yet sharp, swayed with each movement, and her eyes shifted from a deep violet to a soft turquoise in a way that suggested mood, and she did not seem amused. Jaden swallowed and immediately regretted the half-formed joke about her ears he'd been planning since the moment he spotted her. "Nice ears," he said anyway. "Do they hear things?" Her glare could have vaporized a star. Jaden took an involuntary step back. No, bad start. Too soon," he muttered under his breath, spinning on his heel in an attempt to look busy, like a human being who had a clue what he was doing. Arya crossed her arms, her stance both elegant and exasperated. "You're far from the nearest human settlement," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Explain yourself." Jaden opened his mouth and realized he had nothing remotely coherent to say. "Us sightseeing, galactic tourism, heard Lithera was nice this time of year." He cringed at the words as soon as they left him. Arya's ears twitched slightly, which he interpreted as some kind of acknowledgement, but whether it was amusement or irritation, he couldn't tell. "Follow me," she said finally, turning without another word. Jaden tripped over a low-hanging crystal, nearly face-planting into the hum of the glowing ground. "Graceful," he muttered. "Yep, totally blending in." She led him to a gathering of Elyari, where the locals, humanoid but with the same elongated ears and shifting eyes, were engaged in some kind of synchronized ritual. Beams of colored light spiraled from the spires, wrapping around dancers who floated inches above the ground, their movements creating intricate patterns in the air. Jaden tried to copy a step and nearly collided with a dancer, earning a sideways glare from Arya and a snort from someone in the crowd. "Clumsy humans," she muttered under her breath, though not unkindly. As the ceremony progressed, Jaden learned that humor was as alien as the gravity-defying crystals. Someone handed him a cup of glowing liquid, apparently a traditional drink, and he lifted it in a salute that nearly spilled it over a high priestess. "Sorry," he said, "I come in peace mostly." The priestess blinked slowly and Jaden realized he'd probably just signed his own intergalactic death warrant. Arya's lips twitched. "Mostly," she echoed dryly. Over the next few hours, Jaden's attempts at charm oscillated between disastrous and entertaining. He accidentally triggered a holographic projection that illustrated the planet's history, including a graphic depiction of its wars, and tried to make a joke about his own battlefield experience, which earned him a collective, silent stare. "They don't laugh at humor the same way," he whispered to Arya, who smirked and muttered something that sounded suspiciously like "no kidding." Despite his awkwardness, Arya's curiosity seemed to grow. She found his irreverence amusing, his human recklessness strange but oddly captivating. They sparred verbally, trading dry remarks, teasing each other as he tried to navigate alien etiquette while she tested his patience and wit. At one point, Jaden attempted a dramatic bow, slipped on the pulsing ground, and landed flat on his back. "I meant to do that," he said quickly, though his dignity was clearly bruised. Arya's laughter, soft but genuine, rang through the crystal spires, and for the first time that day, Jadin felt like he'd actually made a connection. As night fell, the sky of Lithra shifted into a riot of color, purple, gold, and flashes of electric blue lightning that danced across the clouds without storming. Arya led him to a balcony suspended between two spires. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the luminescent flora glow in the dim light, the floating spires humming softly around them. "You survive by recklessness," she said finally, "and yet you are still here." "I'm also charming," Jadin said, smiling. "Mostly." Arya's eyes shifted to a deep violet. "Mostly," she repeated, but this time there was no edge. He realized with a mixture of thrill and terror that she wasn't just watching him. She was evaluating him, judging whether he was worth her curiosity, worth her time, worth more. Jadin scratched the back of his neck. "So about that thing I said earlier about your ears." Arya rolled her eyes but didn't turn away. "You'll need more than jokes to survive Lithra," she said. Jadin grinned. Challenge accepted. And with that, the first fragile thread of connection was spun, one that would pull them both into adventures neither had anticipated. And Jadin's life, already chaotic, was about to become far more dangerous and far more hilarious than he could have imagined. Jadin woke to the faint hum of the crystal spires vibrating through the floor beneath him, a sound that, strangely enough, was less threatening than the ringing in his head from last night's welcome ceremony. He groaned, rolled off the low platform where he'd slept, an Elyari version of a bed that apparently required perfect posture and the ability to levitate 2 inches above the ground, and landed on his feet with a graceless thud. "Gravity is overrated," he muttered, brushing himself off while a tiny floating creature blinked at him like it had just witnessed the apocalypse. The creature's blinking was rapid, almost impatient, which Jadin interpreted as agreement. Arya was already awake, sitting cross-legged on another floating platform, her long ears twitching slightly as she studied him. Her eyes were shifting between soft turquoise and a steady lavender, which Jadin decided meant she was either amused or plotting his death. "Good morning," he said, attempting cheerfulness while trying not to trip over the low-humming energy fields that threaded the room. "Or, as you might say, please survive another day without breaking anything important." Arya tilted her head. "Mostly important," she corrected, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "And you already damaged the east spire. That was expensive." Details, Jadin said, waving a hand as if sheer bravado could erase his transgression. "I was enhancing the dramatic entrance. You should thank me." Her laughter, soft and melodic, made him realize that even danger could be tolerable if she was nearby. That thought, however, was quickly interrupted when she extended a small holographic device toward him. "You will accompany me today. There is much to learn if you wish to survive and perhaps even impress the council." Impress the council? Jadin choked on his own excitement. Is that like interstellar prom night? "Only slightly less humiliating," she said dryly, rising to her feet. The platform beneath her lifted and rotated with precise elegance, and she gestured for him to step onto one beside her. He did so awkwardly, stepping into a low-gravity field that sent him spinning in a manner that could only be described as pathetically spectacular. "You may want to, I don't know, try standing straight," she suggested. As they moved through the city of floating spires, Jadin marveled at the architecture. Bridges of light connecting hovering platforms, air currents manipulating floating gardens, and streets of pulsating crystal that reacted to touch. "So this is Lithra's version of downtown?" he asked, dodging a passing hovercar that looked like a sleek metallic manta ray. "Downtown is usually less polite," Arya said, her voice calm but her eyes sharp. "Here the citizens know their place, and yours apparently." They arrived at a training courtyard where Elyari warriors practiced combat simulations in synchronized patterns, their plasma blades arcing through the air like threads of pure light. "You'll participate?" Arya said, handing him a lightweight weapon shaped like a curved energy staff. "We need to see if your human reflexes are worth the risk of leaving you alive." Jadin held the staff like it was a newborn alien, wobbling as he attempted to mimic the movements of the warriors around him. His first swing sent a controlled pulse of energy ricocheting off the walls, narrowly missing a hovering drone, which beeped indignantly. "I swear I meant to do that," he said, though the smirk on Arya's face suggested she didn't believe him. Hours passed in a blur of awkward stances, misfired energy pulses, and enough tripping to make him reconsider the value of bipedal locomotion. Yet amidst the clumsiness, Arya occasionally corrected his form with subtle touches or a soft word, and Jadin began to notice that her corrections carried a warmth that went beyond mentorship. "You're improving," she said at one point, her tone casual but her eyes lingering longer than necessary. "Mostly." "Mostly is my favorite measurement," Jadin quipped, wiping sweat from his brow while trying to hide the blush rising in his ears, human embarrassment, unfortunately obvious. "Means I can fail spectacularly without consequences." "The consequences may be deferred," Arya said, her voice low, but not eliminated. By mid-afternoon, they moved to the Gravity Gardens, a vast expanse of bioluminescent flora suspended in controlled anti-gravity fields. Jadin marveled at the flowers that floated like jellyfish, their tendrils waving lazily in the breeze, and attempted to joke about picking one without asking permission. Arya's ears twitched sharply, and he quickly replaced the flower with a sheepish grin. "So, gardening etiquette is serious business here." "Among many things," she replied, though the faint curve of her lips betrayed amusement. As they walked, Arya shared glimpses of Elyari culture, from their art of light manipulation to their history of interplanetary alliances. Jadin listened intently, but found it hard to focus entirely when every gesture she made seemed precise and captivating, from the way her ears swayed to the subtle shifts of her eyes. He realized he was genuinely fascinated not just by her knowledge but by her presence. "You're full of surprises," he said, trying to sound casual but feeling his heartbeat accelerate. "You humans always say that," she replied, though her tone lacked her usual sharpness. "Perhaps you mean it differently." He laughed a little too loudly, and she shook her head. "Perhaps," she said, her eyes flicking toward him, violet now, then turquoise, then violet again. "You are bold, reckless, and oddly persistent. Why do you not run when confronted with danger?" "Because danger has a terrible sense of timing," Jadin said. "Also because you might laugh at me if I do." Her ears twitched, and he took it as a good sign. "Do not mistake amusement for safety," she warned. "Lithra is not forgiving." "Noted," he said, brushing imaginary dust off his shoulders. "Also noted, your smile is more dangerous than any spire or plasma blade." For a moment, silence fell between them, a gentle hum of the floating gardens filling the space. Jadin realized that despite his mishaps, he felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. Arya, too, seemed caught between her duty and curiosity, and in that suspended moment, both knew that their growing bond was dangerous, unpredictable, and utterly enthralling. As the day drew to a close, Arya led him back to the city's central spire, where a glowing observation deck overlooked the horizon. "You survive because you adapt," she said, "and because you are human, which is remarkable." "I'll take remarkable," Jadin said, leaning against the railing. "Mostly remarkable, I hope." She didn't answer immediately, only shifted closer, letting her presence speak. And in that quiet, absurdly human moment of shared laughter and stolen glances, Jadin understood that winning her trust, and perhaps her heart, would not be simple. But then again, nothing about Lithra had ever been simple, especially when humor and danger walked hand in hand. And for the first time, he looked forward to every reckless, ridiculous, and dangerous step that lay ahead. The day began with an eerie calm over Lithra, the crystal spires glowing faintly under a sky smeared with violet and gold. Jadin had a feeling this calm was a lie. He could practically hear it smirking at him, but he brushed the thought aside, telling himself he was getting used to alien paranoia. Arya was waiting at the edge of the central spire, her long ears angled back slightly, a signal he had learned meant she was assessing risk. "We have a problem," she said without preamble, her eyes a steady violet. "The faction opposed to human involvement has mobilized. They plan to strike tonight." Jadin raised an eyebrow. "Strike as in fists and laser beams, or strike as in mildly inconvenient? Because I can handle mildly inconvenient." Arya's lips twitched. "More like the former. Also, you are not mildly inconvenient, you are dangerously unpredictable." He grinned. "So we're a team, got it." They moved quickly through the city, dodging patrol drones and civilians who didn't seem to notice the humans slipping past. Jadin's attempts at stealth were predictable. Every time he crouched behind a hovering planter or tried to blend in with a line of floating citizens, He made some comment about blending in that seemed to reverberate too loudly. Arya ignored him, though her lips twitched more than once. As night fell, the city lit up with the soft glow of the spires, and the attackers arrived in a fleet of sleek black ships that cut through the sky like shards of obsidian. Arya and Jadin took their positions at the apex of the central spire, plasma blades in hand, energy humming against the tension of the night. Ready to impress the council and survive? Arya asked, her voice calm but laced with that sharp undertone he had learned meant pay attention or die. Born ready, Jadin said, flexing his fingers as if that alone would help. Mostly. The first wave of attackers descended, and chaos erupted. Jadin managed to accidentally swing his staff into a drone, sending it spiraling into another attacker's ship, which exploded with a dramatic flourish. "I call that tactical improvisation," he said, ducking a beam of energy with a roll that looked more like falling than fighting. Arya fought with lethal precision, every movement a combination of grace and power. She moved in ways that made the air itself seem to bend around her, and Jadin realized for the 100th time that he was hopelessly outclassed, but strangely inspired. He followed her lead, taking cues from her stance, her timing, even the subtle twitch of her ears. Mid-battle, Jadin noticed a group of civilians trapped under a collapsed crystal bridge. "We've got company," he yelled to Arya. "Also potential lawsuits." Without hesitation, Arya grabbed his arm, and together they leapt into the chaos. Jadin felt weightless as anti-gravity fields carried them over the rubble. He tried to crack a joke about defying insurance policies, but the wind stole the words. They rescued the civilians, and Jadin was struck by the quiet bravery of Lithera's people, their trust placed in someone who was, up until recently, a complete outsider. The final confrontation came at the heart of the central spire, where the attacking commander revealed himself, an Elyari who had once been Arya's mentor, now twisted by fear of human influence. "You betray your kind by trusting him," the commander said, pointing a blade of pure plasma at Jadin. "I don't trust humans blindly," Arya said, stepping beside Jadin, her blade shimmering. "But I trust him, and he trusts me." Jadin swallowed, heart hammering. "Mostly," he added for emphasis. The corner of Arya's mouth twitched upward. The duel was fast, dazzling, and occasionally chaotic in ways that included Jadin accidentally tripping over an energy conduit and launching himself into the commander's path, somehow deflecting a lethal strike. "See," he said midair, mostly heroic. Together they overcame the attacker, and the surviving faction forces fled. The city was damaged but not destroyed, and the council convened to discuss the events. Jadin, exhausted, stood beside Arya as she addressed the leaders. For the first time, he felt like he was part of something larger than his own impulsive adventures. Later, on a balcony suspended above the floating city, Jadin and Arya shared a quiet moment. "You changed," she said, her eyes softening, long ears flicking in a rare gesture of intimacy. "Not entirely reckless, not entirely human." "And you," he replied, brushing a fingertip along the edge of her hand, "you laughed at my worst attempts at charm. That's progress, right?" She smiled fully this time, her eyes a vibrant mix of turquoise and violet. "Perhaps mostly." Jadin laughed, the sound echoing over the spires. "Mostly is my specialty. But I think I'm ready for more than mostly now. Mostly survived, mostly heroic, mostly human, but with you, I think I can."